No. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, hi.
Hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. You're on live TV. This is Global TV. And hello, Sandra Corona in Eastern Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here in the space station, as you could see.
I know.
Yeah, there it is. Wow. And Mark Colo is trying to connect. I don't know where he is. It looks like he's in Africa, but I think he's really in St. George, Utah. But we'll
Okay.
find out. We'll find out. Yeah, okay. So, hi, Doreen.
Good morning. Good morning, Ed.
Yeah, good morning. I want you to meet Sandra. She's in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, Sandra and I have met. How are you?
Yes, fine. How about you, Doreen?
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you ladies could meet up. All right, so this program will start in earnest in around 12 minutes or so, but I decided to plug in live so that the equipment doesn't go bad during everybody jumping in at the same time. And so this is being recorded right now. And so the idea now, as we lead up to the launch at the top of the hour, is to just discuss and do a media prep, meaning a sound check. So Doreen, are you in Mexico or in somewhere else?
I am in Mexico and I have my new Blue Yeti microphone. And I'm wondering if you can tell me if it sounds any good.
It sounds absolutely professional. Sandra, would you like to do a sound check?
Yes, check, check. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, it's good. A little bit of an echo, but it's very professional.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, so tell us about, in a nutshell here, expatology. It's the study of being an expat, or just understanding more about the dimension and the scope?
So yes, expatology is the study of what is the expat life in anywhere you go around the world. When you talk about expatology, you're talking about what it means to have the right set of tools to teach expats how to survive anywhere they go, right? You have coaching, you have cross-cultural training, you have a little bit of empathy going, thrown in there. So you have thanatology, and you have some of the global mobility experience behind it so that you can know where the person is coming from. It's necessary to be an expat, in my opinion, so that you can place yourself where people are coming from, because empathy, when it comes to real true empathy versus seeing it as a number sign, because that's really how expats are seen, it really requires that experience so that you can put yourself in their shoes and say, you know what, don't worry, we're going to try to find a way to fix this.
Great. How's that sound, Doreen? So scientific, isn't it? No, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It is proving to be more scientific than we ever realized before, because as we learn more and more from science about the brain, what we're finding is that our visceral experiences of life, that is what we feel, see, touch, taste, hear, all of those are sort of recorded in our subconscious mind somewhere, somehow. And that science is now sort of demonstrating and catching up. And we've needed it for, as far as I'm concerned, 4 decades, to demonstrate that when you move people, it's not just putting a body on a plane or the belongings in the cargo. You are actually putting them in a situation where they are going to have to transform, and they're going to, and all the work, as far as I'm concerned, 75% of the work is internal, not external. And that's what the new science is helping us with.
Interesting. Mark Colo, can you hear me?
I can, Ed.
Yeah, welcome. Mark Colo, Sandra Corona, Doreen Cumberford, and you are in the Northern Lights, I see.
I'm in the Northern Lights right now, yes.
Yes, all right.
We're actually someplace close to the Aurora Borealis, I'm told.
So that earlier picture that you had behind you, was that in Africa?
Yeah, that actually was. That was a picture of my, let me show you that real quick, because I gotta explain something behind it.
Yeah, it looked like you were on a mission.
Yeah, just about. Okay, this is my brother, Paul. He's a year older than I am. We grew up together in Whittier, California, spent most of our lives, and in fact, all of our lives in Southern California. But Paul works for the San Diego Zoo. And he's actually in charge of the bird department there. He's also the largest parrot breeder in San Diego County. He's got about 150 pairs of exotic parrots that he breeds and sells to local pet stores.
Well, where does he, I mean, does he have an aviary in the backyard?
He does. He has 11 acres. Yeah, he has 11
That's
acres.
funny.
11 acres of land outside of Escondido, an area called Lake Wolford, if you're familiar with the area.
No, I don't know the area, but I know the area north and east of Escondido is a beautiful area.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's beautiful. But
Yeah.
anyway, so he's actually, he likes to travel in his spare time, and he's actually in a small village in Africa. And I'm going to move to the side here for a second so you can see how big this egg is, this monstrosity of an egg is.
Oh, I was wondering what that was. It looked like a marshmallow.
That's actually the largest, that egg produces the largest omelet on the planet.
The largest omelet?
Yes, massive omelets, makes these huge omelets. No, I'm just kidding you. But this is actually a dodo bird egg in this village. They had about a half dozen of these eggs, and it's like a small museum. I don't know if they worship them or not, but it was special to them. And Paul, my brother Paul, got to hold it, and you can see it's almost as large as his chest. And I jest when I say about making omelets, but that would be a pretty big omelet with that.
Well, after the show's over, I'm going to make myself an egg.
Oh.
A scrambled egg.
Not that big.
No, just to Eggland's best or something. Yeah. All right, Ken Summers, welcome.
Hey, Ed, how are you?
Good. Ken, meet Doreen, who's an author and was a diplomat, and with her spouse lived in Saudi Arabia with Saudi Aramco for many years. And also meet Sandra Corona, who is currently right now in Eastern Saudi Arabia, and her spouse, and she has been on an international assignment 9 years and is coming to an end soon. And so she's going to be our star witness here about rewiring her brain. No, I didn't make that up. Doreen did.
That's my term.
So Ken has been an expat 100 times or so, and he's going to relive some of that trauma with us today. And we're going to be talking about it. Hello, Dale. Welcome.
Hello.
Yeah, Dale, you're in, where are you? In Texas?
I'm in Texas, yes.
Yeah, okay. I want you to meet, we are live here on Global TV. And Dale and I've known each other a very long time. And he's been on assignments internationally, and he's going for a PhD. Now, Dale, is your PhD focused in on global mobility or about how companies are using that?
It's really how companies are using global mobility, specifically the international assignment, but it's focused on born global companies. So these are the newer, younger companies that are from inception begin to move around the world. Old time companies, I say old time, companies traditionally develop in stages and become very set nationally and locally, and then emerge and move overseas to different locations. But born global companies arise and begin moving overseas very quickly. And I'm examining how they utilize that assignment and how they measure its value and whether they measure and determine a return on investment. And it's been early, and I'm still looking for more companies to include, but the results have been very, very interesting about the ways in which these companies operate. It's not the same way traditional companies do.
Ken Summers is an insurance executive from the past. He's now in his own practice. But Ken, why don't you just describe yourself a lot better than I just did, and about the kind of assignments. Now, the most recent was when you were assigned to Poland, and you were there quite a while, and you came back. And then recently, Ken introduced me to two ladies who are senior HR people for a high-tech company in Poland, and we did a talk show. Ken, welcome.
Thank you, Ed. Boy, I spent about half of my career overseas, most of it in Asia, and as Ed mentioned, finished up with a stint in Poland, which was a lot of fun, I have to tell you. Most of all of my career postings and all of my jobs, except for the last few years of my career, my corporate career, were in human resources space. And in that last one in Poland, I was actually the interim country manager while we were waiting for the new hire to come on board. So I've been very fortunate, lived in 6 countries plus the US, and got to do a lot of adapting.
No, I bet. Okay,
A
so
lot
this
of brain rewiring.
This show is not a pity party. It is a discussion and a deciphering of what went wrong and what could have been done better, and maybe it will be, and we're going to be talking about all that. Lindy, welcome. This is show number 1 for you on Global TV. Thank you. Lindy is in Texas. She's a very successful realtor and relocation manager, but this is a result of her being on 10 assignments, was it? Expat assignments?
I think it was 10 corporate moves, yeah.
And you survived, and you look wonderful.
And a couple of international moves, yeah. So, and two repatriations, yeah.
Okay, so Lindy, why don't you do a better job explaining to our guests here, and also we're doing a sound check, of course. We're awaiting the arrival of Steve McGarry.
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, good. I just can't see you. That's all.
Okay.
I'm having issues with my video at this point in time.
Oh, okay. Well, take your time. Maybe you want to jump off and come back in and try
Yeah,
that.
I think I'm going to do that. Yep. Okay. Give me a minute, guys. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, so Steve will be right back. And he has just resigned from a 22-year leadership role with a giant advertising company called WPP. He was the head of mobility, and we're going to find out about that and what's he doing next. But he has a wealth of experience to share from that perspective. So Doreen has written a book called Life in the Camel Lane, and that refers to being in Saudi, right?
Mhm.
Okay, you're on mute.
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Sorry.
good. That's all right. Okay, and Lindy, were you in Saudi Arabia?
No, but Doreen and I know each other through Families and Global Transitions, and we did a reeling from relocation for people that had relocated during or just prior to COVID, because we had a lot of friends that had to return to their home countries. I had just relocated to Boston 2 months before the world shut down, and so that was a really fun kind of collaboration that we did with other expats and relocation spouses around the world.
Yeah,
And-
Steve, your picture's not coming through, so you can do audio. That'll be okay if you want to. But we welcome you either way. So Lindy, your company is now called 180 Relocation.
Yeah, so I opened up my own brokerage. It's been 180 Relocation, but I opened up my own brokerage. We really do things different. We, first of all, we don't disable the real estate agents by taking 50% of their commission. If anybody here does that, I apologize, but it was one of the challenges for us when we moved, was having an agent who was only making 50%, 40% of their real estate commission. and here we were, the highest need client getting the lowest degree of service. And so we're just changing up the way that's done. We're also not requiring clients to work with just one agent, because especially in an area as big as Dallas, Fort Worth, that really disadvantages the client. And then we strategically connect people, because we really want people to have their first friend, and that real estate agent is usually the boots on the ground that you can call. And I just, so many times we moved and I didn't have that relationship with that agent, and I would either go into labor a couple of months after having moved, or we would have some kind of other family challenge, or the world would shut down, and I didn't have that first friend. So that's a little bit about what we're doing that's different.
Yeah, Steve, I see you. You must be on your iPhone.
Yeah, I've got a new computer, and for some reason it didn't want to connect once I got onto the Zoom app to the video. So I just pulled my phone out.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I had a tech problem with Zoom the other day where I was upside down. I wasn't in space, and I certainly wasn't drinking at that hour. So, but it was really frustrating. And then I finally figured out how to do it. But after we canceled the show and reset the date, because it was really embarrassing for me. All thumbs when it comes to tech. Okay, so Ken, I want you to meet my friend Dale Collins.
Hello, Dale.
And Steve McGarry. Dale, you must know Steve.
I know Steve from many years back.
Yeah, great. Okay. And Sandra Corona, expatology. She's with her husband in Saudi Arabia for 9 years, and they're going to be repatriating back to Texas sometime in 24. And Doreen has commented that it's going to be a traumatic experience unless you're prepared and you're ready mentally to work. And also it's a process of rewiring your brain to get ready to leave the comfort and safety and security and benefits of being in an enclosed compound or something, going back into the wild and crazy Houston market. And you still don't know what you're going to be doing yet, right, Sandra?
And I'm going to be doing, continuing with expatology, which is the coaching and assisting expats all over the world, wherever they are. I'm going to be in Houston, but they're going to be in somewhere else, but it's going to be the same. Yes, no changes.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, I hope you continue with us in Global Press Club and being on Global TV. So Lindy, what traumatic experiences would you like to touch on as a result of the repatriation process? I'm sure you have more than one story, but I want to get everybody talking together. I want everybody to please network using the chat thing, exchange email, phone numbers, website. The idea is that's your ROI. In addition to listening to me, your ROI is making these contacts work for you tomorrow and the next day and next year. Okay, Lindy.
I think it was mainly just not having that. We moved from Germany to Dallas, Fort Worth. Dallas, Fort Worth is the size of Connecticut. Where we ended up wanting to buy wasn't an area that my agent was familiar with. We also had, my husband had worked with her. It was a company that we had to work with. And then when we came to town, she was busy doing other things. And so the 4 days that I had in town didn't have her undivided attention and didn't have help with schools and things like that. And so I think companies don't know what they're paying for sometimes when they're moving employees. And so they're paying a lot of money. The same thing happened to us when we moved to Boston. I ended up finding our place to live there because the agent didn't have the time I needed. We had a weekend in town and he had 2 hours on Friday, a couple of hours on Saturday, and no time on Sunday. And that just wasn't helpful to us. And it was about the 5th time I'd found our place to live without the help of a real estate agent. Yet they're paying those fees and stuff. And then another thing that really struck me was when the world shut down a couple of months later, he never called to just go, are you, because that was the first thing I did was I called all my clients, how you doing? But I think it's such an easy thing to solve. The problem is you can't monetize it. And I think that's part of the problem with some of these companies. But I mean, an easy way to solve it is to connect them to somebody like Sandra at Expatology, because and that was kind of why I started my podcast and why I love Doreen, because these are women that have thrived in relocation. I've managed to thrive through relocation, and I think there are more of us that do that, and that really helps other people that are struggling to get connected to those people that can help them know the questions to ask when choosing a real estate agent, help them know where they want to live when they're moving to a city as big as Dallas-Fort Worth long before they get here. And that can encourage them on how to rebuild their career. I know, Doreen and I talk a lot about that, and just how we've been able to just evolve every time we move. We become somebody new with each location, and to be able to put those people in front of the relocation client, especially that relocated partner, that relocated spouse, and help them see the possibilities and the opportunity rather than the obstacles, then I've done my job.
Yeah. So Sandra, do you think you're going to become a real estate agent?
Oh, no, no. I leave that to the experts.
That's what I said. I said I would never be a realtor, and here I am. So, but Sandra, we will definitely find some ways to pull you in, because I think what you do is so important for that person to have that first friend that they can talk to. So
Thank you. Steve McGarry, welcome back again. So how many people did you repatriate in your 22 years with WPP?
I don't know, tens of thousands.
wow.
Oh,
And nobody came after you with a gun?
Well, no one came after me per se. I actually have had numerous conversations with people about how they're operating company, the direct line manager or the person that was supposed to be mentoring them in the home location kind of forgot about them while they were on assignment. And when they came, they had absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Normal, very normal.
Yep.
So Dale, how was your repatriations? Does anything stand out as being unusual or vicious?
Vicious.
Not necessarily. I think we also came back the last time in the middle of the pandemic from London. And aside from the fact that it was a pandemic, we had done it enough times. And this time we kind of went on assignment. A lot of the times we went around the world, I took opportunities and changed careers or changed employers. So you kind of go to something brand new versus being sent out and come back. So I wouldn't say it was anything radically unusual, but I would agree kind of with the things that Lindy said. My wife is very self-sufficient, so she goes and does a lot of this herself. And at this point, we've been around the block enough. We can get it done faster than a lot of people who might want to try and help.
Yeah.
So your phrase born corporate,
global.
yeah, I can't even get my head
Born
around
global.
it. So this means like I'm not a company, I mean, I'm me doing this global TV talk show, but it came about from the pandemic crashing my live event business 3.5 years ago. But I had contacts, so I bring them together online here, the global meeting room, as I call it now. And so I've gone global from day one with this TV talk show, but yet you're dealing with somebody who's got money and resources.
Yeah, the concept of Born Global was actually developed in Australia, of all places. I say that only because they coined the word. Born Global companies, you could argue, are hundreds and hundreds of years old. Go back to the East Asiatic Company or the West Indies Company, whose whole purpose was to be a global company. But traditionally, companies are born in their own market. They go locally, they build up resources, they establish themselves, expand within the country, within the nation. And then after years, we think of companies you well know that are such global names. They weren't global originally. We know them because it's 2023, but they've been around since 1906, and they weren't global in 1906. Companies today have an easier, I say an easier time, they're in a different world, different era. And these are young companies, generally resource limited, but with the ability through technology, through a lot of modern communication, able to export, import, and buy and sell goods around the world and establish presence around the world at a record pace that's unprecedented in human history. It took hundreds of years to set up 2 or 3 companies around the world by these old companies, but now we can do this very quickly.
And we do it through what, PEO?
You can do it through different
outsource?
ways. The study I'm doing requires that a company be in at least 2 locations outside its home country to show that it's actually growing internationally. But we've got, the first company I interviewed is in 9 countries outside its own. It was established in 2015. This just was unheard of. If you go back to the 40s and 50s, post Second World War, very few companies would have ever gone overseas or outside their own country. Maybe in North America, you went to Canada, but you did not go around the world. And it was hard. It was difficult. It was a different frontier. And the companies I'm interviewing, excuse me, the whole concept of what they're doing is so normal and so just part of what they do. If you look at this compared to traditional multi-stage growth companies, the whole reason for an assignment is not the same. And the way they use the assignment and the measures they have for ROI, where I would argue most big, well-developed companies have very rudimentary, if any at all, ROI measures for an assignment. These companies look at it very differently, and they look at it on the cheap, and they look at it very quickly, and they're doing things to help their organizations grow very specifically. And it's just a different kind of world. What we may find, and we don't know, we're speculating, is as a born global company emerges and becomes larger, perhaps goes public, do they become more like a multi-stage company and begin to act and behave that way? The answer is we don't know yet, because no one's been able to get there. And there's companies just now arriving at that point. I'm hoping to interview some of those companies, but I'm still looking for those organizations to say, hey, join me, participate. You got my details, connect with me, and we'll set up interviews and talk it through.
Have you reached out to Chinese companies, for instance, like TikTok or
The answer
WeChat?
is specifically, I have not gone to them directly, but I've posted in various forums so that they might find me. But good point, and I may actually go directly to some of those Chinese companies, but not yet.
Yeah. Have you made contact with a gentleman in Singapore, Kerwin Guillermo?
I know Kerwin quite well, yes, and I have been in contact with Kerwin. Great.
He has been on our global TV in a one-on-one, and he's coming back on September 6th. It'll be 5 a.m. for me and 8 p.m. for him in Singapore. And then my plan is to discuss repatriation from an Asia Pacific point of view. And I'm looking for others to join that broadcast on September 6th.
Yeah, for me, Kerwin's great. He's just not a born global company.
Oh, no, HPE is
very
huge.
well established traditional multi-stage company.
Yeah, okay. Steve McGarry, what do you have to say about your experience since leaving WPP, and how does it relate to born global companies? Does this kind of idea intrigue you?
Well, I think, and I'm kind of in a very unique situation in that, you know, I'm looking for my next chapter, and I have been with a company that for the last 20 some odd years that kind of grew in every way possible to become the global entity that it now is. A lot of companies I'm speaking to now, they are companies that are actually what we would consider, I guess, startup companies, cloud companies, AI companies, things of that sort, where they're not really centrally focused on one location. You can't say they're New York based. You can't say they're London based. They're globally based. They are, that the company itself is born globally. I'm speaking to a company now that literally has people in 6 different countries, and it doesn't have a physical office anywhere as of yet. It is truly a company that is being born on a global basis, which,
Wow.
you know, as Dale was saying, you know, you go back years past, and that is something completely different than you know, when I was starting in this industry. If somebody was going to be running business for us, and I was in New York in the Asia Pacific region, most of the time we would send them to San Francisco. We didn't even think about sending them to Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, or China. And then as the economy started expanding into those areas, that's when the offices started opening up, and we started moving people to the point where we moved people around the world, you know, starting in the mid 90s, the way we were moving people around the United States before that. I should say mid 2000s, the way we were moving people around the United States before that. I think the newer companies are this born global kind of situation where you're gonna see companies just popping up. You know, yes, we are a British-based company, but we don't have an office in Britain. But we have people, we've got 200 people in 20 different countries. And that's just the way that they are starting out at this point in time. Has the pandemic actually created this? I think it has. I really do. Because if you want your talent, you'll figure out how to hire them. You'll figure out how to pay them. You know, make sure that they're paid equitably for the market that they're in. You know, you don't want somebody, you know, living in the Philippines making a Sydney, London, or New York based salary, although they might want it. So you want to make sure that everything is being done correctly. And I think that's the way that you're going to see a lot of the newer companies going. I mean, the old traditional market of home based, I think is something that is going to really just kind of phase its way out.
So it'll be more of a rotating thing. Ken Summers, does this sound familiar to you?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. It's, you know, both Dale and Steve's comments about companies establishing themselves as global from the outset. It's certainly something I've observed as well. And Dale, I'll be fascinated to read your thesis when it's done. Yeah, no, this is clearly, I don't know if the pandemic caused it, but the pandemic certainly accelerated it.
Yeah. Okay. So Mark Colo in St. George, Utah. Mark and I have known each other a long time. He's been on many shows. He is the co-founder of FindNeuroHelp.org, which is a 501 whatever approved C3 charity. And it's all about helping medical science, but it's also all about helping people who are impacted by a loved one's affliction.
Yes, it's been quite a journey for me. I've had Parkinson's for about 17 years. Some of you who know me know my backstory, I guess. But my life kind of began as an expatriate when I was assigned on a mission in Britain, Great Britain. I actually went to Northern Ireland for a period of a year.
So this is with the Mormons, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And it was during a time that was called the hunger strike.
Oh yeah.
And if you remember the history of all that, a lot of turmoil. So I was excited. I was 19 years old. I was a young kid. I couldn't wait to hear gunfire, hear bombs going off. And I was kind of a little bit naive, I think, at that age. But it was quite an experience to live in a different culture, different country, different situations with the hostility and you know, all the angst about living there and being there, and it was amazing. But the 2 years for me passed very quick. In my second year, I was in Scotland, and I got to know the Scottish people very well. So if you ask a Scot what time it is, I'll tell you how to make a watch. And that's pretty much holds true. But then I had to repatriate. I had to come back to the States. But the whole experience was very educational, great cultural experience. I recommend anyone to go abroad for an overseas assignment to help and do something meaningful for other people. I think everyone should do that. It's just wonderful.
So Mark and I have been doing over the years some broadcasts bringing on medical doctors and research scientists who are working on not only Parkinson's, but ALS and dementia things. And one of the shows we had was with a company with Jana Stoudemire and Dr. Paula from the National Stem Cell Foundation. She's the head of that. And upcoming in a few weeks, we have Dr. Howard Fedorov coming back on. Mark, why don't you do about 30 seconds here about Dr. Fedorov and why he's so special?
Howard Fedorov graduated from Albert Einstein University. I don't know how you can qualify to go to that university, but he made it. I asked his right-hand man, Massimo Fiandaca, who was a 25-year neurosurgeon, how smart is Howard? And he said he didn't flinch, he didn't hesitate. He said, Howard is the most brilliant man I've ever spoken to. That's a little bit about Howard's background. He was the CEO of UC Irvine Health. And UC Irvine is a large university in Orange County. It's actually the largest employer in Orange County. It's big, big, big group. I just saw an announcement today that they're going to have the very first all-electric hospital that they're going to have opened up here any day now. So they're very forward thinking. And Howard, in my mind, is probably one of 5 or 6 people on the planet that will actually be responsible someday for finding a cure for Parkinson's. He's that smart. And he's also equally as intelligent on Alzheimer's.
So we were on a show, you brought him on our show about 2 years or so ago, and now he's coming back on what's the first week of September.
Yep.
So I'm really honored. We call this series Medical TV Talk Show, where we have a discussion about Parkinson's and other afflictions. And Sandra, you've been on a couple of those as well, and I thank you. And you're certainly welcome to come back, as is everybody else. So, Mark,
Ed?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Can I take Mark back to one of the comments he made before we spoke about his colleague? So, Mark, one of the things you said was that everyone should should go overseas and have an expat experience. And I know I'm taking liberty with your words. I'm going to disagree because, and I noticed Doreen shaking her head, but I don't think it's for everybody. I've seen plenty of examples of people who, and sadly, they're almost exclusively Americans, though not completely, people who don't approach an international posting with the right attitude or mentality. And those folks are, in my experience, almost inevitably doomed to failure. So I don't think it's for everybody.
That's a good comment. And I respect your remark with that. You remind me of Danny Kaye. You've probably heard that from other people. One of my favorite entertainers. And so I will listen to you all day long. I think highly of Danny Kaye. So, but no,
May I chime in on that also, please?
Sure.
I think it's the difference between whether you have a growth mindset or a very planted mindset. If you don't have the natural propensity for adventure, for expansion, and have a huge level of curiosity, there is a very good chance that your overseas assignment will fail. 80% of the overseas assignments for accompanying spouses mostly fail on the back of a lack of curiosity. And so I think if we have those characteristics, we tend to be very successful. But if those are not natural or your go-to point, I believe that international assignments can be the most stressful experiences of your life. I have lost one marriage and one career to repatriation alone. So I feel like when I write about it, it's from the gut, because I was pretty prepared, but I wasn't prepared for everything.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would
The-
add to that, Doreen, I would add to that adaptability.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
That's-
absolutely. It's the Scottish chameleon in me, Mark. You said you went to Scotland, so
Yeah.
I grew up, wearing a kilt.
Well,
So,
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think anybody can perform
yes,
an overseas assignment, but maybe
Yes.
not as well as others. I mean, I agree with that word adaptability. Back for the last, I think the last year or so, I've really keyed in on that, Ken, just that adaptability issue, because I have a condition that just automatically changes things, it changes. And if you can't accept, change, you're gonna have a hard time with some of these diseases, right? The
Absolutely.
Parkinson's is a great case in point. So I feel like adaptability proliferates possibilities. So if you're in a difficult situation, a difficult assignment, or difficult country, or whatever it be, that you have to learn to adapt. You just have to, and you have to be flexible.
Yeah.
Another thing I think you need to do is I think we all need to be a little more courageous. I mean, it takes courage to go on an overseas assignment when you know nothing about the country, very little about what it's going to be like living there. It takes some courage.
Or naivete,
What's that?
or naivete.
That too.
Combination.
Ken, let me ask you a question about coming back from Singapore or coming back from Poland even. That's probably easy, but you've had so many of these assignments.
Well, everyone was different, as you would expect. I keyed off something I think Steve said about home office mentors or lack thereof. I certainly experienced the lack thereof. But I think the hardest part of reentry for me was adjusting to the fact that I was like everybody else again. And I know that sounds very vain, and I'm not typically a vain person, but when you're on an expat assignment, particularly the way we used to do expat assignments with all the bells and whistles, and I know those bells and whistles are disappearing, but I was fortunate to be an expat at a time when, there were lots of goodies, and you come back and say, oh, shoot, that allowance is gone, or that support in getting my kids into a good school is gone, et cetera. I mean, you can make a long list. So just being quote unquote normal again was an adjustment, and it required, I'm seeing Sandra shaking her head. She's anticipating it. And I'll tell you, Sandra, at 9 years in Saudi, we were 8 years in Tokyo. And I can't say enough about Japan. We could do a whole show Ed on Japan.
Okay, it's coming up. My friend Amiko is the CEO of All Japan Relocation, and she's going to be my special guest in Global Japan, we're calling it, sometime after Labor Day. I don't know the date yet.
Fair enough. But the comment I was going to make, Japan was probably the hardest for me, because forget the job and all the perks that came with the job. It was such a safe, clean, accepting environment, at least on the surface. We get beneath the surface is another story, but and then coming back to crazy America was a big adjustment.
Yeah, right. Sandra, let's talk about your issues, or what you sent me, you wanted me to ask you about. Pursuing autonomy and leadership. Another one is types of leadership and how to develop your own. And that's sort of what Ken and what Doreen was just talking about.
Yes. Yeah. So, I think as individuals, when we're in a normal situation, like talking about normal meaning before you're an expat, you don't realize the benefits that you have according to the country that you live, right? So let's talk about the US. We are so independent, we're autonomous. And when we move to a different country, we forget about the cultural differences, right? How things are performed, how things are done, and how do you speak to, who do you speak to, what can you say, what shouldn't you say, and how, all of these things that you don't have an idea that you have to do. And so you start feeling like you are no longer yourself. You start questioning, what do you do? How do you do things? Are you doing them right? There's even a time when you start feeling like you're not doing things right at all. You feel even dumb, right? Because there's so little information about where you're going that you have to expatriate as you go along, right? You have to adapt as you go along. And so, I mean, our need of being responsible of our actions, our decisions, our behaviors is so important, but we feel that we can't because we don't know left from right, because we don't know if we're doing right or wrong, especially speaking particularly here in the Muslim world. You don't know what is right, you don't know what is wrong. You have a 5-minute intercultural orientation and don't show your shoe heels and heels. I'm sorry. Don't speak to women. That was 9 years ago, right? Currently, what I still see is that it's the same thing. Nothing has changed. Things are not being passed on. Information is not being given to people so that they feel that they own their decisions, that they own everything of themselves, and that they can feel confident that they're going to go to work and make the right decisions, especially if you're a leader, right? In Saudi Arabia, there's no more management or leadership positions so much available. Now it's more like, you're just a regular employee. But yeah, I mean, being autonomous, we all want to be independent. And so, owning either information, having the right information is going to help you adapt, right? Speaking about adaptability. So that's what it is.
Yeah. How about from let's say you're coaching a leader, or you are a leader, or you're trying to be a leader, and you have these people who don't want to be led, or reluctantly are being led by you. How do you communicate? How do you win friends and influence people?
Well, first you have to win their trust, right? You have to lead by example. And we forget that that's very important for many cultures. First of all, you have to read, you have to understand where you're going, right? You have to understand the differences into communication. What is the power distance? What can you speak to, or who can you speak, and then how old you are? I mean, we're talking about so much information that you have to own in order for you to be an effective leader. And you start by leading by example, meaning by learning, by observing, by being self-aware of the things that you're doing, right? You cannot just walk in and say, I'm going to do the leadership style #1 or #2 or #3, or I'm going to be the micromanager that I used to be when I was back in the US or in London or whatever you're coming from. You have to adapt, and you have to learn what is that the people need in order to be led.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Doreen, would you like to comment on what Sandra was just talking about from your perspective?
Well, I spent 15 years in Saudi Aramco, and 20 years with the corporation, and 2 of those were in Japan. And part of the time I was an accompanying spouse, and part of the time I worked at the Saudi Aramco schools, and I was teaching the kids the yearbook program. And so I had lots of TCK interactions. And what I observed from living in the Middle East is why I wrote the book, Life in the Camel Lane, which is based on all the stories of what the heck did we learn? Why did we go there? Why did we waste? Why would we take 15 years of this one precious life and put it in Arabia? But it was one of the best experiences of my life. And I think Sandra's right. It comes down to leadership. It comes down to your self-leadership skills. It comes down to using your adaptability and your flexibility and marrying them with healthy leadership skills and a good imagination in order to thrive as an expat. And we moved back to the US, intending to quote unquote settle. And we traveled for about 7 years in and out of the US. And ultimately, we chose to become expats in rewirement or retirement. And so that's kind of my story. And I believe that it really is self-leadership. It's like, where do the breadcrumbs take us? And after we have had that expat experience, how do we heal it? And how do we recover from it so that we're fully capable of living anywhere we want?
Mark, I'll be right with you. Lindy, you just have to take charge, just like you did in Boston, and just finding your own place rather than rely on somebody else. Just get it done.
Yeah. Well, and that was why I started Relo Talk during the pandemic, was to interview these other women like Doreen Cumberford, Amel Jareggi, Sunday Schneider-Bean, people that had really seized that opportunity, and even in the midst of hard things, saw the opportunity to recreate themselves or to support their spouse. I mean, I think that's, understanding when you have a partnership and you understand that you are as a valuable part of that team, and his or her corporate job, and making sure that they also see you as an important part of that team. It just all works a lot better. And but being able to tell story after story after story of these women and men that had done it really well. And my whole point of doing that was so that the relocation industry could get connected with them, maybe bring them into part of the offerings that they do to companies, as well as to encourage other people that had relocated, that had been displaced during COVID. I mean, so many families had to pick up and leave almost in the middle of the night. The kids didn't say goodbye to their friends. Can you imagine having to move back home with an angry teenager that's sad and missing their friends and doesn't understand what's going on, and they're totally out of control? I mean, as a parent, wow, that's hard. And it's all happened because you've sacrificed your life to serve a company or a government or whatever business it is that's taken you somewhere.
Or the spouse.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's still, I mean, even if you're the parent that's working for a company, I mean, you're personally sacrificing something to do that. Even though an expat assignment, like somebody mentioned earlier, I think was it Ken, they can be really a sweet assignment, but when things go wrong, all of a sudden money doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Yeah. So Doreen, you had told me in the past that because of your experiences, you and your husband have become dog sitters or house sitters.
This is my way of traveling the world and not being a tourist. Because as now I'm an interculturalist, training people on how to launch themselves and return and heal from being overseas. So this was a lot of fun because we traveled for 6 years as digital nomads, sort of just living our lives and taking care of people's pets in their homes in over 10 countries. And the wonder of that is that you're not just living, you're not an expat exactly, but you're living at a level that is deeper than a tourist, because you have to find the grocery store. You have to be able to speak a little bit of the language. You have to interact with your neighbors. You've got tasks and purpose. And one of the things that I see with the repatriates coming home, and I'm currently writing a book called Life in the Reentry Lane, is that if they don't have a clear purpose for coming home, you know, that it's just not as meaningful. And so our pet sitting was a way of having fun and putting purpose into our travel.
That's really interesting. We have around 15 minutes remaining. Mark, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to make one one more comment. And along the lines of that point of coming home, not knowing what you're going to do or where you're going to go, or do you even have a job there for you when you come back. I went into the moving storage industry, because at the time I couldn't make it in the real estate industry because the prime interest rate was at like 21%.
Yeah, the 80s.
And agents are all whining today. Oh, God, interest rate might go to 3%. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So it always, things can always change. But this whole element of adaptability, I had a bucket list with a number of things on it. And one was I wanted to write 2 books. I wrote 2 books. One is called Peace with Parkinson's. It's called a resting tremor, not an earthquake. And that's kind of dealing with the psychological adjustment that to hey, you got Parkinson's. You know? And the other book I wrote was The Noble and Great Ones. It's not about proportions, it's what's in the glass that matters most. And that's a book about tremendous athletes, tremendous intelligent people like Einstein and others, people that were great writers, and just people who achieved greatness, but that they did it for the right reasons. I mean, they did it for noble reasons. They had a noble subject. They had something they wanted to impress on others, and they wanted to get it out to others. And so I just people that have impressed me over my lifetime, I put in the book.
Yeah, thank you very much. Steve
Well,
McGarry.
I want to mention is I
Yeah.
did a TEDx talk here a while ago, and the name of the TEDx talk is Adaptability Proliferates Possibilities.
That's a
And
mouthful.
I've got 5, yeah, it was. I've got 5 different principles, adaptive principles that will help you adjust to a daunting situation, whatever that may be. And that's all I have to share on that, Ed.
Oh, okay, okay, Sandra, was that your hand?
I just said, great, you know.
Oh,
'cause-
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Steve, do you think
So-
you're going to become a house sitter?
I'm not going to be a house sitter, although it sounds very interesting. You know, it's kind of comfortable where I am right now. I don't know about that.
A lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, Steve.
It is.
I have to
Sure
twist
it
your arm.
One of the things I did want to bring up is as everybody was talking about adaptability, and you know, something that I've learned is that somebody has to be successful on their assignment before they can be successful on their repatriation. How does somebody become successful on their assignment is very simple. I mean, you hire the right person to do the right job at the right time. There is no doubt about it. But that person, not only does that person, the employee themselves, but their whole family has to be willing to be able to accommodate to a new lifestyle. They have to be able to accommodate to a new culture. They have to be able to accommodate and willing to accommodate to some things and that they have never seen or experienced before. If they can do that for their 1, 2, 3, 5-year assignment, what I've seen happen in the past is that they have troubles coming back. They have to learn how to accommodate back to their home location. So it's not only not having the mentorship or the leadership in their company, the employee and their family has to learn how to readapt to the lifestyle of their home country or home location. Some of the more successful assignments and repatriations I have seen have been where not only did we offer cross-cultural training to somebody moving to a culture that they had no idea about, but also gave them cross-cultural training moving back home. If you are in a perfect example, you're in Saudi for 9 years and you come back to the United States for 2 weeks a year to visit family. When you move back to the United States, it's going to be a huge culture shock. And it doesn't have to be Saudi Arabia. It can be, you know, Singapore, it could be China, it could be Korea, it could be even someplace like the UK or Australia.
Mhm.
There's an adaptation period that you have to get, that you and the family have to be able, you have to be willing to accept that you are going to have to adapt to how to learn and live in your home country again, or your home location.
Steve, you couldn't be more right. I'll share a quick story. We spent most of our expatriate time in various places in Asia. And for those of you who have lived in Asia or traveled extensively there, you know that the definition of service is very different than the definition of service in the US. And I will tell you, been home 3 years now from the most recent posting. I'm still struggling with the lack of service in the United States.
Mhm.
No, the service means people willing to do things for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or particularly when they say they're going to do things for you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lindy?
Oh, I was just going to say expectations, you know, expectation management's a huge part of it. And it really did surprise me to see how much money the company spent, how much resources they gave us when we moved to Europe. But we didn't, moving back is just as hard and almost even harder in some ways. And again, the resources we needed wouldn't have cost money. It was just an understanding of what it was we needed and making sure that the people that were taking care of those needs were empathetic and understood what those challenges were. I mean, why you wouldn't set up a phone call with a Doreen Cumberford or a Sandra Corona with that expat and the spouse and the partner, to just kind of give them an hour to prepare and to know the kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly to expect. You know, it's expectation management. And I often say, you know, it's like so much emphasis is put on that expat assignment, but it can be just as hard to move from Texas to Boston. And it's certainly harder to move back. And there are a lot of things that go with that too. There's some real challenges for the employee, you know, because they're not seen as a rock star anymore necessarily in their business. And you do, it was like somebody was saying earlier on the call, you know, you're given this false sense of wealth and prestige and position that you don't have when you come back to your home country. And again, it's just expectation management and helping people through that. And it's not inexpensive. It's one of the cheapest things you could do in the assignment. You know, giving Doreen's book to somebody, you know, I don't know what your book price is, but it's not going to be, yeah. A
Yeah,
very easy thing to
Yeah,
do too.
yeah.
that's a great thing, a great comment. And I would also say that together with expectation management comes, you know, there are unintended consequences of moving overseas, and none of us can see around the corners. And so it's coming back with the expectation that maybe there will be consequences we can never prepare for. And it's just standing in that space and making that okay. Plus having a terrific transition team, which now we have with Sandra and Lindy here, moving into these places where there are people who are coming back who understand the total package and understand what it takes, not only for the employee, but for the family, including the third culture kids and the wife if necessary.
So as we come to a close here in the next several minutes, and we can go longer if you want, it's just that I know that everyone's got a busy life. So Dale, you've heard a lot of different talk here. Some will be old hat to you. Some I'm sure is new. I've got a question for you, and I'd like your opinion of what you've just heard also, but I've got a direct question to you. Would it be helpful for getting to achieving, measuring ROI of an assignment? If there were an assigned coach or mentor to the assignee and family from day one, and maybe on a 90-day cycle of checking in and grading what has been learned, what issues still need to be resolved, how is that assignment progressing, where's the ROI for the company, where's the ROI for the assignee and family, and what about the services? You've been on both sides. So what about the diverse and complex services providers, everything from tax and legal to housing to schooling to language, cultural adaptation lessons? It goes on and on. Rather than throw somebody into a boiling pot, essentially, quote unquote, why not train them? Why not give them a leader role of how to do it right? You know, taking them along. And then
Wait.
preparing them for the next assignment later. Isn't that ROI, Dale?
The short answer to your question, Ed, is yes, of course. And I would even advocate this is every company can define ROI for what it means to them. There isn't one. We build a building in the field and determine it's going to produce widgets. We can all agree, everyone universally, how to construct an ROI for that to produce widgets at a cost. Every purpose for going overseas and taking an assignment can be more or less unique. Companies have categories, and Edstrom and Galbraith give you the 3 classic reasons in their seminal article in 1977 of what those 3 reasons are. But by and large, everything comes down into one of the 3 categories. But your point is this: companies that recognize that the return on investment has to be measured in terms that make sense to them. I've argued this. You may spend $50,000 on an expat on an indefinite quick assignment, and that person does exactly what you want, and there's a quick return. You may spend $2 million on someone and get nothing out of it. The question that companies face is, what is the term of return you're willing to talk about? So let's say we send Steve on assignment and he goes off and it costs us $3 million, and we send Doreen off and she costs us $50,000, and a year later Doreen's produced $100,000 and she's worked all the it's 50, we've got a great return. But 10 years later, Steve takes over as CEO, builds the company and moves it $10 billion forward. Is that a good return on investment by having him go overseas? And the answer, of course, is, well, it seems like it, but we don't really know. To your point is this: setting goals, understanding objectives, and having purpose, the research shows, is absolutely paramount if you're going to do ROI. I would recommend you to an author named Yvonne McNulty, who has some great research out there about establishing proper ROIs and what they call the expat ROI, which is made up of the corporate and individual and what you get out of an assignment. And she's extensively written with her colleagues on this topic. And she describes what you mentioned, Ed, as absolutely paramount. If you're going to do this right, you need to know what are the objectives, set them up for success, invest in what success is, and that can be different levels for different people's backgrounds. Your first assignment versus your fourth, and some of our people here who've been around the block a time or two, or the globe, as we would say, they don't need the same investment as someone who's first time ever out. So, but coaching them, giving that, and providing feedback regularly, those are all the best practices that companies do. Some companies do them really well, some do not. I'm studying the young companies to see what they're doing differently or how they're doing this. Again, if you're limited with your resources, you can only invest so much. But there's, I think Maureen said it, if you get the young people who say, hey, I just want to go because I've got that wanderlust spirit, that go get them, the thing that took the early explorers who said, yeah, I'll go live in the new Caribbean islands that they explored 50 years ago that we didn't know existed, but I'll go do it. Those are the people that you want to give a shot.
Yeah, Steve McGarry.
I don't think I have a whole lot more to say than what Dale actually just said. There is, I guess, the people that major corporations, not even major, I think the people that are corporations are targeting to work for them, especially if they're single, they have a wanderlust. And as Dale said, people going to these Caribbean islands. I think one of the things that's happening with this wanderlust with some of the newer workforce is that they're realizing that they don't have to work in one location. The way that, you know, the companies are creating themselves globally, I think some of their employees are trying to create themselves globally as well. I mean, as you and I have spoken about in the past, there are compliance risks in all of that. But I think one of the things that's happening is that because there is this, for lack of a better term, wanderlust of some of these younger generation employees, that they want to go and use digital remote work visas wherever they may be and go spend 2 months here, 3 months there, wherever the situation may be. We may see, you know, the expatriate assignment as we have known it, even decrease further than it has in the past. There's nothing from stopping somebody to pick up their laptop and pack a backpack and go to Costa Rica for 3 months. Yeah.
So in the Wall Street Journal, was it today or yesterday, that somebody wrote this thing with big chart showing that it's counterproductive for companies to dictate return to the office?
You know, there are certain industries where being in the office with your coworkers, I think, is paramount to getting the job done correctly. You have to be sitting across the table from somebody. You have to be in the same office. You have to be able to turn around and ask your colleague a question. When you're talking about creative work and creative teams, they need to be together. It's just the way it is. There are certain things that, you know, do you need to actually have people in the office for certain industries? My guess is no. But that's up to every organization on what they want to do. You know, but I don't, you know, when I look at people picking up and going someplace, I look at it as from a compliance standpoint, because that's the way my brain has been trained over the last 20 plus years. You know, we're working on the mobility. People ask me what kept me awake at night. It was the compliance issues. So I look at the compliance issues, but, you know, is it counterproductive to tell people that they have to come back to the office? In certain industries, I think it might be, but in certain industries, I think they need to be there. But it's up to every organization. And of course, every organization is going to look at, and I hate the term, employee experience. But hate the term employee experience, because the people that are managing the employee experience have no employee experience themselves.
Exactly.
Oh boy, how do we end this? Maybe that's it.
Yep.
Ken Summers?
No, I was just shaking my head in agreement with Steve. I'll share one thought before I sign off. I think probably the single most valuable experience I had in the workplace overseas came from my colleagues in the country. And I was relatively new in the position. And I approached the leadership of that team the way I had been taught in a previous company where I started my career and spent 20 years, and quickly learned through the painful yet gracious feedback of my direct report team that I had to adjust to that environment. And they beat the living you-know-what out of me for about 3 hours. And as painful as it was, I remain grateful to this day. And this was, 20 years ago. I remain grateful to this day for the graciousness, the feedback, the pain that they inflicted, because it made me a better person and a better leader. So, you know, there are painful lessons, but sometimes they can be really helpful lessons.
Dale, I hope this has been helpful for your research, and I thank you for your perspectives.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ed.
thank you all.
Thank you, Ed.
We'll be
Thanks, everyone.
sending
Thanks,
you
Ed.
the program
Enjoyed it.
later today. And thank you. Bye-bye. This is
Bye-bye.
Ed
Thank you.
signing off in
Everybody.
San Diego.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye.